In less than 24 hours, the 2026 World Cup begins. The Estadio Azteca in Mexico City, the ground where Pelé collected a trophy in 1970 and Diego Maradona, produced perhaps the most debated 10 minutes in football history 16 years later, will host Mexico against South Africa in front of 83,000 people. The tournament that has generated more institutional controversy, more sustained public criticism, and more genuine internal pressure on football's governing structures than any edition in the modern era, will finally have a football answer to offer. Whether that answer is sufficient to displace everything surrounding, it is a question the next 6 weeks will resolve. But today, June 9th, 2026, the final day before the World Cup begins, produce a sequence of developments that makes the word build-up feel inadequate. What happened today was not build-up. It was the most concentrated single day of consequential off-field news in the entire preparation for this tournament, and it demands to be documented in full. Start with Omar Abdulkader Hirsi. He is 34 years old. He is Somali, and he was selected as one of 52 referees to officiate at the 2026 World Cup, a selection that carried genuine historical weight, because no official from Somalia had ever been appointed to a men's World Cup in the history of the competition. That appointment represented something beyond personal recognition. It was a moment of documented significance for a country that has endured generational hardship, and that has a football community which had earned the right to that pride. Last weekend, Hirsi arrived at Miami International Airport. He carried a diplomatic passport issued by the Somali embassy in the country of his residence. He had completed FIFA's full accreditation process. His name was on the officiating roster. At the airport, he was subjected to what U.S. Customs and Border Protection described as additional screening, a standard procedure applied when officers need to verify information or assess a traveler's admissibility. Following that process, he was found inadmissible on the basis of what authorities described only as vetting concerns. He was placed on a return flight. Somalia is among the countries subject to a complete travel prohibition under current U.S. government policy. FIFA released a statement. It confirmed that Hirsi would not be officiating at the tournament after being refused entry. It stated that the organization is not a participant in host country immigration decisions. It noted that the determination of who may enter the United States rests with the host government. It confirmed the decision would stand. The statement was brief. It was, by the standards of institutional communications, striking in what it did not attempt to argue. Hirsi responded publicly. He said he was in a positive frame of mind and focused on the next phase of his refereeing career. He expressed gratitude to FIFA and to the Confederation of African Football for their support. He said he intended to maintain his officiating standards as he looked ahead. Somalia's Ministry of Youth and Sports issued a statement confirming that he had held a valid visa. The basis of the inadmissibility ruling, described only as vetting concerns, was not elaborated on by any American authority. Ian Wright found out and responded in the way Ian Wright responds to things that demand a response. In a video posted to his Instagram account and shared hundreds of thousands of times within hours, he ran through the accumulation. Officials denied, fans denied, players denied, journalists denied, referees denied. He said he was laughing, but acknowledged it wasn't funny. He asked whether this was how a host nation was supposed to behave at the world's greatest sporting event. He asked whether this reflected the spirit of football. He said he felt for American supporters, people who had waited for this moment and who deserved better than what the surrounding circumstances had delivered. He called it a World Cup of chaos. That phrase was not chosen for provocation. It was a conclusion of someone who has spent his entire adult life inside football, who covered the 1990 World Cup in Italy, who will be working as a television analyst across this tournament, and who looked at the documented sequence of events and said the phrase that fit. He was right, because within hours of the referee's story developing, a second story arrived that, in its implications, was even more significant. Iran's Football Federation released a statement claiming that FIFA had revoked its entire ticket allocation for all 3 of its group stage matches in the United States. Under standard World Cup procedure, every participating federation is entitled to receive 8% of stadium capacity for each match their team plays. For Iran, competing in a venue approaching 70,000 seats in Englewood, New Jersey for fixtures against New Zealand on June 15th and Belgium on June 21st, and then in Seattle against Egypt on June 26, that allocation represents several thousand tickets per match. Those tickets are the mechanism through which a federation reaches its most committed supporters, the people who followed the team through qualifying, who attended away fixtures, who have organized their lives around watching their national team compete at the highest level. The Federation's statement said that in an unexpected development, the allocation had been withdrawn entirely, that under current circumstances, it was unable to distribute a single ticket to Iranian supporters for any of their 3 matches. Iranian supporters had already been subject to travel restrictions since the previous year. The original allocation had been directed primarily toward members of the Iranian diaspora living within the United States, people not subject to travel prohibition, who held legal residency or citizenship, and who had the practical ability to attend the matches. Some of them had purchased tickets. What happened to those purchases in the immediate aftermath of the Federation's claim was not clear at the time of writing. FIFA did not publish a response confirming or contradicting the Federation's account. That absence of public clarification, given the gravity of what was being alleged, was itself a form of information, set the Iran ticket story alongside everything else that has accumulated around their participation in this tournament. Their sports minister declared in February that involvement was impossible under any circumstances. A diplomatic intervention brokered through Mexico's president made it possible. The Federation declined to attend the draw ceremony in Washington. Senior Federation officials have been refused visas to enter the United States. The squad is based in Tijuana, crosses the border on match days, and returns to Mexican soil each evening. And now the Federation is claiming that the supporter ticket allocation for matches their team qualified to play has been taken back the day before the tournament opens. No single one of those facts describes a normal World Cup participation. Together, they describe a situation without precedent in the competition's history, a qualified nation navigating a set of conditions that no other team in any previous edition has been required to manage, now moved to a completely different register. Because June 9th was not only a day of institutional failure and individual cost, it was also the day that brought into focus one of the genuinely compelling football stories of this entire tournament. Marcelo Bielsa is taking Uruguay to the World Cup. El Loco, the most meticulous, most obsessive, most intellectually demanding tactical figure the game has produced in the past 3 decades, guided Uruguay through qualification and placed them in Group H alongside Mexico, South Africa, and Czechia. The opening group, the one that starts everything. Bielsa, who watched so much opposition footage that rival clubs had to build dedicated viewing rooms to accommodate his preparation sessions, who reportedly spent an entire pre-match night lying in the technical area of an empty stadium in order to understand what a manager sees from that position, who managed Argentina, Chile, Athletic Bilbao, and Marseille with an intensity that players consistently described in terms that combine the language of ordeal with the language of transformation. He is unpredictable by design and by nature, and that unpredictability is not a liability. In a tournament where the major contenders have been studied, modeled, and categorized from every available angle, a Bielsa team operates outside the boundaries of conventional expectation. Uruguay traveled with Darwin Núñez, Federico Valverde, Rodrigo Benker, players of consistent European top-level quality, and with a particular character that Uruguayan football carries to every major tournament it attends. A country whose population is smaller than many of the cities hosting these matches, competing with the conviction that geographical scale has no relationship to footballing ambition. Their first match, against Mexico in Mexico's home country, with a crowd that has adopted Javier Aguirre as one of their own, will be a tactical contest worth watching with full attention. Nobody, as one considered assessment noted, has any reliable idea what Bielsa is going to do next. In a tournament carrying months of accumulated institutional weight, that quality is genuinely welcome. Then there is the absence that Nigerian football cannot stop feeling. Nigeria are not at this World Cup. For the second consecutive time, a nation that identifies itself as the continent's defining football power is watching from outside. The diaspora of their talent is everywhere in the field, Michael Nguessan with France, Manuel Akanji anchoring Switzerland's defense, Jamal Musiala carrying Germany's creative burden, players with Nigerian heritage or Nigerian parentage representing national teams across the draw. Nigeria's own team lost on penalties to the Democratic Republic of Congo in the qualification playoff final in Rabat. For coaches during a single qualifying cycle, a 4-3 shootout loss that ended a campaign defined by administrative confusion and institutional inconsistency. John Obi Mikel did not absorb it quietly. On his podcast and in appearances on British radio, he said what the situation required someone to say. He described it as a failure. He described it as a disaster. He said that football is the one common language that holds Nigeria together across its internal divisions, across regional identities, across religious lines, across the economic distances between its citizens. When Nigeria plays, he said, everyone watches, everyone supports, everyone experiences joy at the same moment, regardless of everything that otherwise separates them. And for the second consecutive time, that experience had been taken from the people by a federation whose leadership, in his assessment, had failed at every operational level. He said the entire board of the Nigeria Football Federation should resign, not as an expression of frustration, but as a considered position from someone who played at 2 World Cups and understands precisely what the preparation of a national team requires. He said winning the Africa Cup of Nations would not remove the specific pain of missing the World Cup. He said Nigeria belongs on the largest stage the sport offers. The weight of that statement comes from a man who knows what that stage feels like and what it means to be absent from it. What connects these 4 stories? A Somali referee turned away at an airport, a qualified nation supporter tickets allegedly withdrawn the day before their opening match, a 68-year-old tactical obsessive placing Uruguay back among football's contenders, a continental giant watching from home for the second time in a row, is that each of them, in its own way, illuminates the gap between what the World Cup declares itself to be and what it has actually produced in June 2026. The tournament presents itself as a universal celebration. It opened its doors to 48 nations. It assembled the largest prize fund in the competition's history. It spans 3 countries and 16 cities across a 39-day competition. And on the final day before it began, it sent a man home from an airport because of vetting concerns that were never explained. It, or the organization running it, appears to have revoked the federation's right to offer its own supporters access to matches they are competing in. It will begin tomorrow without the most populous nation on the African continent, whose captain has spent months explaining publicly why their absence is not an accident but a consequence. Ian Wright's phrase will stay with this tournament, not because it was the harshest thing that has been said during this build-up. It was not, but because it was said by someone who loves the game without reservation, who wanted this tournament to work, and who looked at the accumulated record and found no more accurate word than chaos. But chaos is not the complete picture, because it cannot account for what happens when the football itself begins. Bielsa is somewhere in North America tonight, almost certainly awake, almost certainly studying footage of South Africa that most opposing coaches haven't considered worth reviewing. Iran's players are in Tijuana, a squad that has managed more accumulated adversity in its preparation than any team in the modern history of this competition. And they are ready. 48 nations are ready. The football begins tomorrow regardless of subpoenas and empty stands and referees on return flights and ticket allocations that disappear without explanation. It begins because players of genuine quality have spent their careers preparing for this specific pressure on this specific stage, and nothing in the institutional record of the past 18 months changes what they are capable of producing when the first whistle sounds of the Azteca. The question this tournament now carries into its opening night is a simple one, and it has no comfortable answer yet. When the final whistle blows in the final at MetLife Stadium on July 19th, which version of 2026 will the record show? The football or everything that surrounded it?